Howdy, howdy, howdy. So welcome, gents. So I'm John Biggs. I'm working with Grit Daily, editor over there. I have Samir and Harry, right?
Harry,
yeah. I'm half asleep. I just landed. So right now we're going to do a cheat sheet for you guys on VC. The mission of this panel is to talk about how to create relationships with VCs and how to choose a VC that is going to be right for you. It's basically a two-way street. So why don't we start with how you guys pick startups, just in a general sense, like what are you looking for, and if somebody out here was trying to pitch you, what were you looking for specifically? Why don't you go first?
Yeah, and just as a way of background, so I previously started a company called Funding Circle, and I've now started a new company called Super Payments, which Harry has backed. And Super Payments effectively offers completely free payment acceptance online. So whereas you would pay 1% to 5% from Stripe, PayPal, all the other payment companies here, we do it free forever. And what that means is businesses can pass on discounts to customers at checkout, so you pay less if you pay with Super Payments, and we make our money if we drive additional customers to businesses completely separate to that process.
So everybody should use Super Payments.
Everyone should use Super Payments,
right.
yeah. And I don't know, Harry, if you
yeah, so my name is Harry Nelis. I'm with Accel. I'm based in the London office. Accel is a global venture capital firm, 3 offices, one in California, one in London, one in India. And we're focused on helping very early stage entrepreneurs build big businesses. So we make investments as small as $2 million. We do seed, Series A's, and then we keep following these investments on.
All right, so Harry, why don't you start with just your general investment thesis, and what are you looking for when somebody pitches you?
So the number one thing is to get in the door is a warm introduction by someone who knows the VC firm is the best way to get in. So cold emails or cold calls typically don't work well, but if you can get an introduction from someone who knows one of the partners, that's absolutely the best way to get in. What we're looking for, we're looking for entrepreneurs who see the future first. So people who have an insight, a great idea, and who have the ambition and the tenacity to make that a reality. The second thing that we look for is people who are good sellers, people who can sell the idea to investors, people who can sell the idea to new team members who would join the entrepreneur on their journey. So that means being a good recruiter and being a good fundraiser potentially. And then the third one is a person who has just the raw intelligence to keep learning faster and faster, because there will be many twists and turns and adoptions needed off the plan, and somebody who can react quickly and agilely is what we're looking for.
And Samir, I'm sure you've pitched thousands of times now, so what are your tricks?
So I think in my previous business, God, I can't remember how much we raised, hundreds of millions of dollars, and then we took the business public, and then now I've started Super Payments, so I'm back at the beginning. And I mean, there's lots of interesting stuff, like as entrepreneurs get to the public stage, you realize just how different pitching to public market investors is to private market investors. And the biggest difference, I think, is in the private markets, you only need really 1 or 2 people to believe in what you're doing to actually be able to go and then raise money and carry on your journey. Whereas in the public markets, it's completely different. It's really a voting machine where you meet hundreds of investors on roadshows every 6 months. But I think the main thing, if you are starting these businesses and you're going about it, is the earlier rounds are definitely always harder. People don't know who you are, you're starting something new. But really, the main thing is you can have hundreds of no's, but you only need 1 yes. So you need to be quite resilient. You need to keep hustling. But ultimately, it does start to get easier over time.
So I think there's a phenomenon in startups, especially when you're first starting out, when you're like bootstrapping, doing all that stuff, that the founder might be a PhD. They might know how to send a rocket to the moon, but they don't know how to fundraise. They don't know how to sell. What would you advise that person to do? Should they bring somebody else from the outside? Should they, I don't know, take a improv comedy lesson, something like that? What's the best practice there?
I've got a limited experience of me, but I think you just have to learn to not enjoy it is the wrong word, but it's part of the entire process. As Harry said, as a startup founder, you are selling all the time. Like, you're selling to investors, you're selling to employees, you're selling to yourself to keep yourself going. It really is quite important to develop that skill set, and the only way to do it is just to try. It's like anything in startups. You just need to keep trying things and do it quickly, even when you're embarrassed. Launch a product when you're embarrassed about it. Like, actually go out and pitch, even if you've not done it before. You'll get better very, very quickly. But the only way to do that is to start actually going out there. I wouldn't necessarily advise hiring someone to do it, or because I don't know what Harry would say, but the only investors are wanting to believe in your vision and your dream, as opposed to some salesperson you might have brought on.
Yeah, I think especially for a seed or a Series A, you don't want to have help that won't be part of the venture itself. So if you are on your own and you do not like the selling, but you've got a great idea, either look for a partner before you fundraise, or fundraise and say, together with the investor, let's look for somebody who can help me on the commercial side. So many successful teams, there's some entrepreneurs who do it on their own, but there's also many duos that do it, or many trios that do it. And the reality is that it's very hard to have all the qualities needed in one person to actually have that in one person. So if it's distributed over 3 people who work well together, it's perfectly fine as well.
Do you recommend, I always call this like Beastie Boys style, pass the mic. Do you recommend multiple people come in and pitch at once? Or is it only the founder, or is it only the COO? What do you think, Harry?
I would limit it to 2 or 3 people. 2 or 3 people who are really bought in and who drive the conversation and thinking. So a big team of people who all say a little bit, I don't think is that helpful. Because at the end of the day, the investor needs to know, who am I talking to at the end of the day, and the other way around.
Mm-hmm. So we're also kind of in a downturn, let's say. Do you think we're going to see the same energy in terms of investment, seed, even going public in the next few years, or I guess let's say like next 18 months? Has that changed at all, as from your guys' perspective?
I don't know the market as well as Harry, but when I built my last business, I did it in a very similar environment to this. So we first raised money in 2009, coming right out of the financial crisis, and continued to grow the business right the way through. And arguably, we went public before the kind of real boom time in the private markets. And my personal view is, I know it's a bit cliche to say it, but I actually think it's a very good or great time to build a business. I actually like building a business in this type of environment, mainly because if everyone can just raise money and everyone can get a check in the bank, it actually makes it quite difficult in terms of competitive economics, in terms of sales, whereas actually in environments where you have to work harder to get that money, you've earned it, and there's less competition to actually deploy. But I've only known environments like this, and I kind of feel like, okay, it could affect the valuation could be higher, lower, but does it really matter at the end of the day? Really, if your business is growing and getting traction, there'll be people that will want to fund it. But I don't know if Harry disagrees.
No, we are as excited now to back new entrepreneurs as we were a year ago, 2 years ago. The reality is that the market is a bit slower, and that's primarily because a lot of the fundraising has been done last year. So a lot of the deals of today were done 6 to 9 months ago already. So it's a bit quieter, primarily because there's a lack of supply from our perspective than the other way around. But I think this is a great time to build a business from scratch. Many of the very successful businesses today were created in darker times, as Samir pointed out. And there's a lot of money available.
So I think one of the things that people don't know is when to start raising money. I mean, you're in for 2 million, so you might be a little bit further down the road for a lot of people. But when is the best time to start raising money? Is it as soon as you have your deck ready? Is it as soon as you have your MVP? Is it as soon as you have some money coming in? What are VCs looking for from a startup, a smaller startup specifically, that'll kind of pique their interest? And you can start here.
It depends very much on the situation. So if it's in the case of Samir, when Samir raised money for super payments, it was Samir and an idea. It was not Samir and an idea and a product, because the product had yet to be built. But I knew that Samir was able to recruit the people to build the product, and that the product was going to be there at some point. If you don't have that track record, and it's really the first time you do this, then to have a bit more, maybe an MVP, is probably the right thing to do. So it depends very much per situation.
So when you started, it was basically just an idea, right?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we've done the same thing twice, really. So when I started Funding Circle in 2009, so Funding Circle is the largest online small business loan provider in the UK and US. So it's done nearly $20 billion of loans to 130,000 businesses. But when we started, it was just an idea, and it's a very unique idea in the sense that it's a marketplace. So you needed investors and borrowers. So there was literally no way we could build this thing without raising money. And so we went and quit our jobs, and we wrote a business plan, because we were all ex-consultants, so we thought that's what you would do. But it kind of comes back to this thing I was saying earlier, which is you just need to look for a market of one. So we focus completely on getting the first angel investor confident enough in our idea to give us money. And then we said, in the similar way that it sounds like VCs need warm introductions, so can you introduce us to some other people? And then they introduced us to some other people, managed to convince the others, and then we eventually got to a certain amount of money. The second time, with super payments, like we have a very ambitious model, which is effectively replacing the Visa MasterCard ecosystem. So to replace businesses that big, you do need a lot of money. And so I went to talk to people that had backed me before, and a few others that hadn't. And thankfully, Harry offered to lead the round. But I mean, I've told Harry this a few times, but he always forgets. But I've always taken Harry actually at a lower valuation than other investors were willing to give us. Even the first time was probably 10% lower. This time, there was people were offering a lot more money to be at much higher valuations. But that's where it's very important to choose your partners carefully, because it's a long-term relationship, and you have to have a lot of trust in that person, because, well, those of you who've done it before will know it's a real roller coaster, these things.
I think this you guys can answer this together. I think, what do you think they saw in you early on with the first product, right? Why could you walk in the room with just a deck and say, let's do this thing? What was your background, et cetera? This might help folks understand what kind of depth you need to get that kind of trust immediately, right?
I mean, you
Yeah, so it is salesmanship at the end of the day.
Salesmanship.
It is intelligence, raw intelligence, a good idea. You cannot sell something that's not a good idea. So a good idea, raw intelligence, and salesmanship. And doing it, showing up.
Showing up. That's an interesting question. All right, so what are some of the best ways to attract angels? You probably have some angels floating around in your networks, right? what are some of the best ways to attract angels? To talk to you straight out of the blue doesn't work. But an angel, we would assume that we should be able to email them, we should be able to tweet at them. What are some of the non-annoying ways to talk to an angel?
I mean, it sounds cliche. I mean, I don't do much angel investing anymore, but it's generally warm introductions from someone else that you know. But even like just cold emails, you know, I've invested in some businesses where it's just a cold email, and I actually thought, actually, it's a good idea, you know. So, I mean, to Harry's point, you just need to keep hustling and trying. And it doesn't stop being that way, even when you're a public company. It's all about hustle and just going out and trying.
Okay. You have some ideas, Harry? For attracting angels.
It's a
different thing, right?
It's networking. Fundraising essentially is networking. It's making your way from one person to another. Maybe the first person isn't the one who's going to fund you, but maybe he'll make an introduction to somebody else who will. So it is networking, hustling, and the more in person, the better. Because if you're a good salesperson, you can make that connection, you can move that sale forward rather than non-person.
So what I'm hearing is the founder should be a good salesperson, 100%, right? It's a non-starter otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, look, as a startup CEO, you only have a few jobs really. Like, you have to create the strategy, culture, you have to hire great people, and you have to make sure there's enough money in the bank. And that is part of your job, and all of those jobs actually require being good at sales. And look, it doesn't mean that if you think you're rubbish at sales now, you should just not start a company, because these are skills you learn and develop over time. Well, you get better, basically.
Yeah, and it is not sales in the transactional kind of manner. It is convincing people about your idea and building a relationship with someone that will turn into a trusted relationship that then may result into an action. So it's not transactional, it's really relationship building.
Harry, have you seen this is just an interesting question, have you seen a company that you knew was hopeless, and that wasn't going to be able to, you weren't be able to fund it? What were some of the aspects of that company? You remember anything like that?
Well, it's the antithesis of what we just
yeah,
talked
exactly.
about. So a founder who is not communicative, an idea that is not compelling, or not compelling enough. There's one element to fundraising too, is you need to know what you want to do and if that is a fit for the person who might finance you. So in the case of Accel, we want to finance really big ideas, and you may have a good idea, but it may not fit that category of ideas. But there's other people who do focus on your thing. So knowing your audience, as in knowing what they are interested in and what they want to hear, and pre-selecting them is another key element to do.
That's an interesting question. Were you doing that? Were you doing like due diligence on who you're pitching?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's different phases of a business, really. Like, so in the angel phase, you're just trying to get the money, and angels are generally disengaged, and there's a lot of them, so you just need to get as many as you can. And then I think there's this VC phase of the business, which is actually incredibly important to choose the right VC. Like, I never raised money from anyone unless I'd built a relationship with them before. And even in process rounds where we'd had banks helping us. Because you just need, I don't know, it's a long-term relationship you're going into. You need to have felt like you've got to know the person. And then you go to public markets, which is a completely different kettle of fish, where you're pitching loads of people, and everyone's got a 100 billion fund, and they're all writing, gigantic checks with a 1-hour meeting typically. So there's different phases of it, but I put a lot of effort into getting to know the venture investors, but also referencing them in the background to see what other entrepreneurs thought. Because as I said before, it's a long-term relationship, and you need to make sure it's the right partner.
All right, so everybody should come up and pitch Harry, right? You want
Yeah.
everybody to pitch you? And you're still doing a little angel investing?
Only, not really. I don't
not,
know.
not really.
Pitched
All
too
right,
much.
good. So don't bother him.
Okay.
All right, thanks guys. This has been amazing. Hopefully this was helpful. I think this was kind of like a primer, right? I think it works. All right, perfect.
Thank you.